7 of It, Welcome to Derry is probably the most heartbreaking, gut-wrenching, devastating pieces of television I've ever witnessed. Oh my god. Gotta talk about this episode, spoilers ahead. The episode opens up way back in the past. We see Bob Gray, who was the actual Pennywise the Clown, performing in front of a group. He's basically telling the story of losing his wife in this little skit he's doing. And then he's terrorized by a bunch of kids after he's like, hey look, this is how my wife died. And then the tombstone. I don't know, it was an interesting depiction of him kind of telling his story through his art. After he's done performing, he goes back and he talks to his daughter and she comes out in her costume and he announces her as Periwinkle the clown, and she's like, well, that was Mother's name. And he's like, well, it's yours now. We can tell that Bob really loves Ingrid and Ingrid really loves her father, which makes the whole situation even more depressing. Because later we see Bob, he's sitting there smoking and drinking, and this kid comes out of the woods, this creepy kid, and he's like, hey, what are you looking at? And the kid just goes, well, it seems like the children are really drawn to you. And he's like, uh-huh. And then he goes, hey, I've lost my parents. Do you think you could help me find my parents? And then we hear a scream off in the distance in the woods. And Bob, being a decent person, is like, okay. So he grabs onto this creepy kid's hands and the kid leads him into the woods. Someone finds his handkerchief in the woods with a bunch of blood on it, and they tell Ingrid, hey, sorry, your dad is probably dead. He's probably been eaten by wolves or something. And so she is devastated. But you can see why it has taken on the appearance of Pennywise the Clown, because he saw all these children being drawn to his performance. So it makes sense that he's like, hey, yeah, I can use this image as a way to get more people to snack on, I guess. Cut to present day, and all these creepy ass people have showed up en masse. All these awful white guys have showed up to the black spot, and they force their way into the bar. This episode really wasted no time devastating us. So we see all these awful white masked men break their way into the bar, and they demand Hank. And at first everyone's like, we don't know what you're talking about, but Hank emerges, which is oh my gosh. And then Ronnie's like, no, Dad, no, no, no. Hank is trying to give himself up, and you can only imagine what this group of people would do to Hank. But everyone else in that bar is like, nope, we have guns too. And so they pull their guns out. And so it's a standoff between the masked men and everyone at the black spot. So the ringleader is like, you know what? We'll leave. And so they leave the bar. But very soon you hear them put chains on the doors, and everyone soon realizes what's happening as they throw things through the window and light the entire place on fire, and chaos ensues. All the exits have been chained. There is no escape. Absolutely devastating, heartbreaking, because people start going towards the window to try to see, can we get out here? But then they're shooting at them too. So people are not only getting trapped in this fire, they're getting, pew-pewed in the head. And it's just awful. It's just terrible, devastating chaos. Everyone is running around, and it's just awful. It's madness. All the kids are in there too. Literally everyone's running around. It's complete madness, and it's devastating. See all these awful white masked men just sitting there enjoying what's happening inside. It's awful. While the chaos is happening, we see Dick start to see more deceased people, and he follows one person into a corner where the fridge is, and then he soon realizes that if he moves the fridge, there's a hole underneath the fridge, and that is the only way of escape. While that's happening, a poor woman grabs hold of Pennywise's hand because he's like, I know a way out, and then he starts literally eating her face. And so Ronnie sees this, and it's terrifying. Not only are they trapped in a burning building, they are trapped in a burning building with Pennywise the Clown, while a bunch of crazy racist people are outside with guns. It's just it's terrifying. So Dick is basically being led around this building by the chief of the Native American tribe that we saw in a previous episode who passed away, confronting Pennywise. The chief is basically guiding Dick to find the kids. And so he finds Ronnie, but he sees Pennywise, and all these deceased people show up behind Pennywise. It's terrifying. But Dick is able to get Ronnie and Will and Hank out from under where the fridge was, and so they escape into the woods. And they're like, please go find Marge, please go find Rich, where are they? So Dick's like, I'll go back in and try to find them. I mean, so many terrible things happened in this episode, but oh my gosh, this is the most devastating thing I've ever seen. Oh my gosh, so Rich and Marge are stuck, they're trapped, and are stuck in the building. Already we saw Marge's arm catch on fire and Rich put it out, and they realize there's no way out. And so Rich sees this cooler, and he's like, quick, we can both get into this cooler and it'll protect us. And so he puts Marge in it, and Marge realizes, wait, there's only enough room for me. And then Rich closes that door, and Marge is like, no, 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 no. And Rich lies on top of the door so she cannot open it. And he's just so sweet. He starts talking about the first time he saw her, about she was wearing this yellow sweater. And when she walked by him, she said, take a picture, it'll last longer. And he was like, you didn't say it in a mean way. But you can tell he's had this crush on her for so long. And he talks again about knights and how he's the knight and he's going to save the fair maiden. And after the take a picture will last longer comment, He says, I spent so much time thinking about like what I could have said back. I know what I would have said, and I would have said, I wish I could. And Marge goes, I love you, Rich. And Rich goes, I love you, Marge. You just know what's about to happen to him. So outside, all these assholes are like, well, I guess we'll leave now because no one's gonna survive this. So they go ahead and leave, but Ingrid's awful husband is there and his car won't start. And then all of a sudden we see someone appear out of the woods. We see Ingrid appear out of the woods dressed as Periwinkle, and she approaches her husband, and her husband's like, what are you doing out here? And then all of a sudden Pennywise shows up and she's like, oh, hi, Papa. And the guy turns around and Pennywise just like kind of rips his head in half pretty much, and has a little snack. And so Periwinkle is very excited to see her Papa, it's not her dad. We learn that Ingrid is awful, and she basically tipped off all the terrible racist people that Hank was at the black spot so that it would cause as much fear and devastation as possible, because she knew that Pennywise couldn't resist that amount of devastation. And so basically she set up this whole situation just so she could see her dad again. What a terrible woman. What a terrible woman. And then like she's talking to Pennywise and they share a weird moment where like they hug and stuff, and it's like he's about to leave and she's like, did I do good, Papa? She's like, don't leave. And then she realizes, oh wait, you're not my dad. You ate my dad. And he admits, like, yeah, I ate your dad. And then she freaks out, and then she sees the dead lights, and then she just kind of goes into a catatonic state. So Ingrid is a terrible person, almost as bad as all the terrible murderer racist people. I don't know, it's a toss-up. Later on, we see the firefighters arrive, and they save Marge. Marge sees Rich's body, and she just sits there holding it and crying, and Ronnie and Will show up, and they go in and they hug both of them. Later, we see them outside, and again, Marge sees them kind of like take his body out of the room. It's awful, it's so sad, and they're holding Marge, and they're all so devastated together. We see Charlotte and Leroy show up, and of course they're overjoyed to see Will. Ronnie lets them know that, hey, Hank is in the woods. And so Charlotte goes out to talk to Hank, and they kind of devise a plan, and she's like, I have a friend I can take you to. Hang tight, we'll figure out how to get there. As things are happening, we see like Ingrid being wheeled out, and she gives them like a weird look, and so you're like, oh no. She was already a little bit cuckoo, but now she's like, whatever she is now. We see Leroy and Charlotte talking about Hank, and they kind of discuss taking Hank to their house because, like, who would expect him to be in Derry? Because literally everyone thinks he's dead. Over here on the radio, they're like, oh, a tragic fire broke out. And, oh, I'm so sorry, Stanley. We lost the butcher. That's so sad. And it's like, no, he was awful, and he murdered all these people. It's just terrible. It just shows, like, the racism in the town is just devastating. It's awful. So Charlotte and Leroy take Hank and hide him in their house. We see Leroy approach Dick and ask him, like, are you okay? And Dick's like, nope, I'm not. This was terrible. But it was interesting watching Dick kind of be guided by the chief through this experience. Later we see Rose and the group of Native Americans come together, and they're discussing how the cycle has finally ended. I think Pennywise claimed like 30-something souls, and so they're like, you know what? This was terrible bloodshed, but at least the cycle is over. So we learn that something terrible is happening behind the scenes that they're not aware of. Back on the military base, we see that the military has basically found one of the pillars, and they take it out of the turtle shell, and they start to leave with it, and Leroy's like, hey, what are you doing? Where are you taking it? Like, we want to contain this thing, right? That one awful soldier is like, we're just following orders. We're going to take it to, study it. We'll return it. I don't know. And so they take it away, and we see Daniel see what's happening. So he goes to tell Rose. We do find out that the friend that Charlotte was discussing was Rose. So she brings Hank to Rose's house, trying to get her help for him to cross into Canada and get out of the U.S. Later on, we see at the military base that they are not, in fact, like studying this pillar. They are going to incinerate it. And so they're about to burn it. And Leroy runs in and pulls a gun on everyone. Is like, don't you dare, don't do it. And then Shaw's like, hey, get up here, we got to talk about things. Leroy goes up to talk to Shaw, and Shaw basically admits, yeah, we're not actually going to like use it to control it. We're basically going to release it into the country because we can really use fear, because all these things are happening, like the civil rights movement, women's rights, things are getting a little disordered. We're going to use just the fear of what this can bring to kind of manipulate America. It even cites what happened at the Black Spot about like, that was terrible, but look at the town now. It's pretty quiet. And so it's awful. Shaw is awful. And Leroy is like, what the hell? He pulls a gun on Shaw too, and the other terrible soldier stops him. They incinerate the pillar, and Leroy leaves, but things are not looking good for Leroy because Shaw tells that soldier, yeah, make sure he doesn't leave the base. So I don't know what's going to happen to Leroy next episode, but it's probably not going to be good. Because we see poor Leroy, he's been so diligent, he's been so loyal to the military, but now they've completely like surprised him and did a 180, and he's completely betrayed by them. Kind of seeing his belief system crumble before him. It's really sad for Leroy, and I'm very fearful for his life. We basically see after they've move the pillar. We see Pennywise kind of sitting in this vat of like body parts and blood and stuff, and we see him open his eyes. So we're like, oh no, he was hibernating, but now he's awake. And then we see Will in his kitchen, and he answers the phone, and it's Ronnie on the phone, and she's like, oh gosh, I just can't get over seeing Rich pass away like that. And then Ronnie starts saying some like really terrible things, and we realize, nope, he's talking to Pennywise on the phone. At first, Will is being brave on the phone, but then he turns around and he sees Pennywise in his kitchen. He's covered in blood and stuff, and Pennywise lunges for him, and he opens his mouth, and Will sees the dead lights. And so that's how we leave Will in this episode. It's just awful. I mean, we already lost Rich. Oh gosh, I don't want to see anyone else suffer. So that was basically episode 7. The next episode is the finale. It looks insane. I am so afraid of what's going to happen in the next episode. But this episode was absolutely heartbreaking. It was so terrible. I love Rich so much. He was like my favorite character this whole season. And to see him sacrifice himself in this way, at least he went out a little hero. He went out as a knight. He protected his fair maiden. It was so sweet and so heartbreaking. This kid is a great actor. What an amazing episode. It shows how like Stephen King can mix in the horrors of like fiction with the horrors of reality. In regards to like the racism that happens in Derry, it's absolutely disgusting and heartbreaking. I was honestly shocked that they showed everything that they did. It was just like such a terrible scene, the fire scene to get through. This episode was rough, y'all. But I just loved the show so much, and I really thought this was an amazing episode. What did y'all think about episode 7?